Hello everyone, this is David Arthur Agenda Truth, and this is my first video, and I thought I'd read by giving you my manifesto, what I would like to do with this video series. So I endeavour to give to you, the people, the truth about what is going on in the world. I research every single day, I read for hours on end. I am not satisfied with uncertainty. I have a distaste for lies. Governments, corporations, and those who wish to exert power over you are doing so due to a knowledge differential. I am here to bridge that gap, to give you the tools necessary to take back your own power and the rights that are inherently yours. Rest assured, I'll be working tirelessly against many heads of the Hydra. I'll be reading out research papers, books of which I prefer to have a hard copy of, as in this day and age, with all the censorship coming about, it is imperative that we record and have hard copies of everything we read, say and write. Later down the line, I'll be reading fascinating psychological, sacred, mystical and occulted texts. Thank you for supporting me. So, today's first paper is Electromagnetic Radiation due to cellular, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth technologies. How safe are we? This is an official science document from IEEE Access, and I'm going to read it all the way through, as I feel a lot of people say there's lots of research out there, peer-reviewed science, but when do we actually hear it? When do we read it? So let me tell you, the corresponding author, Moshe Gizani, Department of IEEE, Berlin Institute of Technology and Science, BITS, BITS that is, Department of Computer Science, Qatar University in Qatar. So here's the abstract. The electromagnetic radiation, EMR, abbreviated, emitted out of wireless communication modules in various electronic devices have been identified by researchers as biologically hazardous to humans as well as other living beings. Different countries have different regulations to limit the radiation density levels caused by these devices. The radiation absorbed by an individual depends on various factors, such as the device they use, the proximity of the use, the type of antenna, the relative orientation of the antenna on the device, and many more. Several standards exist which have tried to quantify the radiation levels and come up with safe limits of EMR absorption to prevent harm. In this work, we determine the radiation concern levels in several scenarios using a handheld radiation meter. By correlating the findings with several international standards, we are determined based on thorough scientific evidence. This study also analyzes the EMR from common devices used in day-to-day life, such as smartphones, laptops, Wi-Fi routers, hotspots, wireless earphones, smartwatches, Bluetooth speakers, and other wireless accessories using a handheld radio frequency radiation measurement device. The procedure followed in this paper is so presented that it can also be utilized by the general public as a tutorial to evaluate their own safety with respect to EMR exposure. We present a summary of the most prominent health hazards which have been known to occur due to EMR exposure. We also discuss some individual and collective human-centric protective and preventive measures that can be undertaken to reduce the risk of EMR absorption. This paper analyzes radiation safety in pre-5G networks and uses the insight gained to raise valuable concerns regarding EMR safety in the upcoming 5G networks. Okay. Introduction. The ever-increasing adoption of wireless communication has created a very complex situation of electromagnetic radiation, EMR, abbreviated, exposure. With newer technologies such as 5G, the number of devices will increase exponentially and operate on a broader frequency spectrum. With this upcoming technology, the society will be more connected than ever before and would witness huge economic growths. However, it is very important to identify beforehand if any harmful or adverse effects resulting from increased exposure of human beings. Currently, there are about 15 billion wireless local area network (WLAN, abbreviated) devices, ranging from Wi-Fi routers to Internet of Things (IoT) devices. 9 billion mobile connections, and about 60% of the world population currently uses mobile phones. 15 billion wireless WLAN devices. Mental. Any unidentified or unaddressed health hazard due to use of these devices or exposure to their radiation could impact the health of people globally. Several organizations at both national and international levels have established guidelines for limiting EMR exposure in residential as well as occupational scenarios. Scientific research on EMR exposure-related biological effects began as early as the 1940s, but gained significant pace in the early 2000s with the widespread increase of EMR exposure due to cellular communications. I'll just read that again. Scientific research on EMR exposure-related biological effects began as early as the 1940s. Okay, so there's a lot of evidence, there's a huge body. So we're talking 80 years worth now of research. The International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, abbreviated ICNIRP, has issued regulatory limits on EMR exposure for the general public and workers. I'll refer to them as ICNIRP from now on, ICNIRP. ICNIRP's 1998 guidelines have been adopted by most of the countries in the world today, but these limits only take into account the thermal effects of EMR and dismiss evidence on the biological effects of EMR exposure as unclear or unsatisfactory findings. In addition, there are several standards prescribed by medical bodies, such as the Building Biology Bioinitiative and Austrian Medical Association standards. These limits have been arrived at after extensive scientific research of thermal, non-thermal, chronic exposure and biological effects carried out by health experts from across the world. On comparing these limits with those prescribed by the ICNIRP, it can be seen that the limits prescribed by the medical bodies are several of orders of magnitude lower than those prescribed by the ICNIRP. Therefore, a clear understanding of the differences between these limits and an assessment of the current exposure levels in accordance with both kinds of exposure limits mentioned above is the need of the hour. So you have ICNIRP, and then you have three different independent biological bodies, and ICNIRP is several orders of magnitude off the scale in terms of limits. In literature, many research studies have analysed health hazards due to EMR exposure. Numerous adverse health conditions such as cancer, infertility, damage to the auditory system, alteration of blood cells and blood flow, mental, cognitive and sleep disorders, and impaired childhood development have been identified in various studies. We have explored the literature in this area and presented a section describing various health risks associated with EMR exposure. The major contributions of this paper are highlighted below. This paper analyses radiation levels of commonly used cellular, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices to estimate how safe they are to human beings in terms of radiation. The procedure followed in this work serves as a tutorial for the general public who can arrive at a good estimate of their radiation exposure with minimal technical knowledge or expertise. This paper reviews several works which have identified various health hazards resulting from EMR exposure and presents the findings to highlight the dangers of excessive EMR exposure. This paper suggests techniques for people, as well as societies, organisations to protect themselves from excessive EMR exposure, and also presents ways to minimise ambient EMR levels in different environments like schools, hospitals and homes. The rest of this paper is organised as follows. In section 2 of this paper we discuss the nature of EMR used in wireless communication devices and the need to analyse EMR from various common sources such as mobile phones, laptops and other cellular, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth devices. In section 3 we discuss a few important standards and guidelines for EMR exposure which have been determined by scientific organisations and commissions to avoid EMR related health hazards in humans. In section 4 we present our findings on the radiation levels present in common use cases of popular devices. In section 5 we summarise the important health hazards of EMR exposure that have been documented and reported. In section 6 we describe some measures to protect ourselves from EMR and also discuss ways to minimise ambient EMR in public places. In section 7 we recommend some proactive prevention techniques which can immediately be adopted at both individual and societal levels to prevent harmful EMR exposure. In section 8 we discuss our findings from section 4 in light of sections 2, 3 and 5 and 6. We finally conclude the paper in section 9. Yeah. So it's a pretty awesome paper. Very, very, very relevant for what's happening now. Part 2. A. Ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. When referring to interaction of EMR with biological systems, EMR is categorized into two types, non-ionizing and ionizing. About 60% of the human body is water. Based on whether the incoming radiation is high enough to break the chemical bonds of water or not, it is categorized as ionizing radiation. It can break the bonds. And as non-ionizing radiation if it is not able to. Several classes of electromagnetic waves are classified as non-ionizing and ionizing radiation as depicted in Figure 1. The frequencies we are interested in, radio frequencies, falls in the category of non-ionizing radiation. So let's just go to that image there. We can see here the most common sources of EMR exposure in Figure 2 is cellular, which is mobile devices, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Okay, and this image here we see the non-ionizing is 1 MHz to 1 GHz. That's classed as extremely low frequency. Radio is next, microwave is next, and that goes up to terahertz. So 1 MHz to 1 terahertz is non-ionizing. And then we have infrared, visible, and ultraviolet going into X-rays and gamma rays, and this is ionizing. I'm not sure what PHZ is, or EHZ is, or ZHZ is, but I assume you have megahertz, gigahertz, terahertz, and then God knows what hertz. It's going to hurt, definitely. Now, some of the most common electronic devices which people use today, such as mobile phones, smartphones, laptops, wireless speakers and headphones, and smartwatches, all communicate using radio frequencies. Broadly, they can be categorized into devices which use cellular, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth technology, as shown in Figure 2. This kind of radiation has been linked with various adverse health effects in human beings. The severity of these effects varies with the power of radiation, distance of the radiation source, the kind of device, the type of antenna used in the device, the modulation technique used in the communication, and the duration of exposure. So we can see there's lots of parameters here. Electromagnetic radiation in the frequency range 20 kHz to 300 GHz is referred to as radio frequency radiation. So it's up to 300 GHz. Most of the commonly used communication devices, such as FM radio, television broadcast, satellite, cellular global positioning system, which is GPS, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, all lie in this frequency range. So let's have a look at that table. Here's the table. You can see that, yes. Name of technology. So we have name of technology, the frequency band it uses, and the deployment year. So common wireless technologies. 1G, 800 MHz, was deployed in 1970 to 1980. 2G, 850 to 900 to 1800, 1990, that was deployed. 2.5G was 1900 MHz, and that was in 1985. Have you ever seen that Tom Wheeler FCC press conference? And he goes, 3G, 1G. He's an absolute nutter. 3G, 800, 850, 900, 1800, 1900, and 2100 megahertz. So you've got different bands there. In 2004, that was deployed. Sorry. I didn't know there was point Gs. So we've got a 3.5G here, 3.75G here, and a 4G. What did I notice? Ah, yes. If you look here at 3G, it says 800, which is the 1G frequency, 850 and 900, which is the 2G frequency, 1800 and 1900, which is the 2G and the 2.5G frequency, and an additional frequency of 2100. So you can see that 3G actually incorporates all the bands of 1G, 2G and 2.5G. So 3G was quite a significant increase there. 3.5G, now we're talking gigahertz, 1.8 gigahertz and 2.6 gigahertz, and that was deployed in 2007. 3.75G was 3.5 gigahertz and 5.8 gigahertz, and that was deployed in 2012. 4G, which is 1.8 gigahertz and 2.6 gigahertz, was deployed in 2009. And then you have WiMAX, I'm not sure what that is, 2.3 gigahertz, 2.5 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. And that was deployed between the years of 2008 and 2015. 5G, 600 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, and 24 to 86 gigahertz. So you see they've opened up the spectrum there quite drastically, 24 to 86 gigahertz. And 600 megahertz to 6 gigahertz is basically 1G all the way through to 4G. And that was deployed, it says here, deployed 2018. Okay, so it's already here. Wi-Fi, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And that was in 1997. That was a long time ago. Bluetooth, all versions 1 to 5 GHz. Okay. Moving on. Section B, motivation. An antenna is a transducer which converts AC electric currents flowing in metal conductors to radio frequency electromagnetic waves and vice versa. Antennas are used in all wireless radio frequency communication devices during transmission. AC electric current is supplied to the antenna's terminals, which induces the antenna to radiate EMR waves in the radio frequency range. During reception, the antenna intercepts radio waves to generate an AC alternate current electric current at its terminals, which is applied to a receiver before amplification. In the latest smartphones, which are in use today, there are several antennas for different communication purposes, such as cellular, GPS, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Table 1 lists the most commonly used wireless technologies at present and their frequency ranges, and that's the table we just discussed. Figure 3a shows the usage of multiple antennas in a smartphone. So let's have a look at that. Might have to zoom in there. Okay. So you have LTE MIMO antenna. Wow. MIMO is massive in, massive out. And that's in your phone. And there's one on each side here. LTE MIMO, vertical polarization here, horizontal polarization here. Got a Wi-Fi antenna, we've got a Bluetooth antenna, 2.45, which is the same as Wi-Fi. GP3 antenna, you've got a CDMA antenna. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You've got 6 antennas in your mobile phone. No wonder it's lethal. Similarly, Figure 3b, Figure 3c, and Figure 3d show the antennas used in the GeoFi 4G hotspot, the Wi-Fi antennas present in a laptop, and the Bluetooth antenna used in a wireless earphone, respectively. Now, I've never used one of these GeoFi things. Is it some kind of dongle or something? I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell me in the comments, or you can message me. I'm sure I'll research it later anyway. Here's the Bluetooth antenna. So some people wear this in their ear all day, and the antenna's right there, right on the edge of the ear. And here's the laptop Wi-Fi antenna, and you can see there's 2 in the head there. So that'll be directed straight at your head. Crazy. It's good to know where they are, actually. A cell phone communicates wirelessly with a cellular base station that is typically hundreds of meters away. The antennas on a mobile phone are not directive, i.e. they transmit and receive EMR roughly in all directions. Their radiation pattern is roughly omnidirectional. This enables good communication because the user does not necessarily orient the phone in the direction of the cell tower. These antennas ensure the propagation of the electromagnetic waves to the enabling communication. The omnidirectional nature of these antennas cause radiation energy to dissipate in all directions. But this means that a mobile phone emits radiation directly into the head of the user. Moreover, when the phone is situated in areas with weak reception, such as the far end of its closest cell tower or in the basement of a building, its radiation increases by several magnitudes in order to ensure good connection with the cellular base station. And when science says order of magnitudes, that's a lot. Laptops communicate with both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth technology, but Wi-Fi is used more extensively to connect to wireless routers located nearby. Just as for mobile phones, the laptop antennas are designed to ensure good connection regardless of its orientation position in a Wi-Fi zone. Hence, even laptop Wi-Fi antennas are roughly omnidirectional in nature. Laptops are mostly used either on the lap or on a desk. When used on a lap, severe amounts of radiation directly into the legs, groin and torso region. Moreover, since the antenna is located very close to the body, the magnitude of radiation is extremely high. When used on desks or tables, the face of the user directly faces the antenna. Most laptops have their antennas located at the top of the display. Laptops are used for several hours at a time in very close proximity, and hence raise more concern than mobile phones, which may be held next to the ears for just a few minutes during a call. That's if you just use mobile phones for calling. If you talk to a lot of people, they're glued to their mobile phones 12 hours a day, so I'd say mobile phones are massive risk. In the last 2 years, the popularity of Bluetooth headphones and earphones have increased drastically. Some of these earphones, such as the one shown in figure 3C, which we showed you earlier, these devices are worn by users almost throughout the day and kept active almost continuously. In addition to the radiation from the earphone itself, the connected smartphone or mobile phone kept in the pocket also emits Bluetooth radiation continuously. For a common user, it is very difficult to measure the three-dimensional pattern to estimate his own safety in regards to EMR exposure. Therefore, in this document, we analyse the radiation levels from the most common sources and scenarios of EMR exposure. We then correlate our findings with a few well-defined, scientifically and holistically determined safety limits. Okay, so there's the, just so you can see there, there's the pictures for you again. Let's pause and have a look. Okay, section 3. Standards and guidelines for electromagnetic radiation. Ideally, it is expected that a well-defined safe exposure limit would apply to people of all countries. But there are striking differences that arise due to thermal effects, non-thermal health effects, and precautionary measures considered in determining the limits. Different countries across the world adopt different RF EMR exposure limits based on these considerations. For example, the United States adopts limits based only on thermal effects. Russia and China have taken non-thermal effects into account while determining their standards. Switzerland and Italy have taken precautionary measures to account for any adverse health effects which may be discovered in the future, and therefore adopt exposure limits even below non-thermal effects. Damage arising from only tissue heating is considered while determining thermal exposure limits. Such safety limits are prepared based on the assumption that it is sufficient to consider only heating effects while trying to minimize harm to the human body. But in the last few decades, it has been well established that biological and adverse health effects occur at radiation levels which are too low to cause any heating, sometimes several 100,000 times lesser. So I'll read that again for all the ionizing and non-ionizing argument people. But in the last few decades, it has been well established that biological and adverse health effects occur at radiation levels which are too low to cause any heating, sometimes several 100,000 times lesser. Okay? In this section, we discuss the guidelines on exposure limits prescribed by IEEE, Building Biology, the Austrian Medical Association, and the Bioinitiative. The IEEE guideline is the most widely adopted guideline in the world at present, being adopted by around 50 countries, but it only takes into account the thermal effects of EMR. While the standards prescribed by Building Biology, Austrian Medical Association, and the Bioinitiative take into account thermal, non-thermal, chronic exposure, and biological effects of EMR as well. In this section, we present a comprehensive summary of the above-mentioned guidelines and standards in light of the requirement of this work, i.e., electromagnetic radiation due to cellular, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth technologies. So I'll just read that little bit again. So IEEE only takes into account thermal effects, but Building Biology, Austrian Medical Association, and the Bioinitiative, this is what they take into account: thermal, non-thermal, chronic exposure, and biological effects. Okay, so that's a much bigger scope than IEEE. Okay, Section A, IEEE. The International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, it is a mouthful, is an international commission which specializes in non-ionizing radiation protection. The EMR exposure limits of more than 50 countries in the world today are based on IEEE's 1998 publication. 1998. The exposure limits, if you look back on that table here, this is when the standards were made, back in the 2G era, and here we are, adding all of this frequency, and people are still banging on about IEEE's safety guidelines. Come on, guys. This document provides different guidelines for occupationally exposed individuals and members of the general public. They have prescribed two types of restrictions, namely basic restrictions and reference levels. Basic restrictions are difficult to measure, especially for people who are not experts in the field of antennas and do not have access to sophisticated experimental setups. They require sophisticated experimental setups and costly equipment, but reference levels can be easily measured using simple handheld RF radiation meters. Here we only consider the reference levels for general public exposure in the frequency ranges of the wireless technologies considered in this work. The reference levels at these frequencies for general public exposure are listed below, where F is the frequency of the concerned EMR source. Table 2 lists the reference values in microwatts per meter squared, calculated for some wireless technologies. And here it says 400 to 2000 megahertz is F over 200 microwatts per meter squared. And then 2 to 300 gigahertz is 10 microwatts per meter squared. I'm just going to go over this table here, table 2. These are the IEEE reference values for general public. And this was made in 1998 publication. Okay, so 1G, 800 megahertz upper band frequency, 4 million microwatts per meter squared. 2G, 1900 megahertz, 9.5 million microwatts per meter squared. 3G, 2100 megahertz, 10 million microwatts per meter squared. 4G, 2.6 gigahertz, 10 million microwatts per meter squared. Wi-Fi, 2.5 gigahertz, 10 million microwatts per meter squared. Bluetooth, 5 gigahertz, 10 million microwatts per meter squared. So you can see with 1G and 2G, 2G they just doubled it. 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, well, 10 million. Just got a bit lazy. Section B, Building Biology Standard. This is the second body. Let's have a second right here. As we're in lockdown at the moment. And it's a mint, ginger and chamomile tea. How nice is that? Okay. The Building Biology Standard takes into account the physical, chemical and biological hazards present in places where people work, live and sleep. It considers the influence of various factors such as different electric fields, magnetic fields, waves, radiation. Let me get that so you can see it on the screen. Yeah. Radiation, indoor toxins, pollutants, fungi, bacteria, allergens. Radio frequency, EMR, is also included and addressed as a critical influence in their standard. It aims to enable an individual to identify, minimize and avoid all such factors in their own life without any need of sophisticated equipment or scientific expertise. Their evaluation guidelines are intended to be used in areas where there is risk of repeated long-term exposure, such as sleeping and resting areas. Well, everywhere now. Their guidelines are precautionary in nature and define 4 levels of concern which are listed below. Okay, first one, extreme concern. The values categorized under extreme concern require an immediate and swift attention and correction. Short-term exposures to radiation under this category will cause problems like headache, nausea, dizziness, while long-term exposures can lead to more serious diseases as discussed in section 6. The second band is severe concern. The radiation values coming under this category are tagged as unacceptable from the point of view of building biology, and they must be addressed. These values are unnatural for human beings. Chronic exposures to these radiation levels can sow the seeds of future health diseases. Number 3, slight concern. This is a precautionary category, as radiation levels categorized under slight concern can affect sensitive population like pregnant women, small children and unhealthy people. And the final one is no concern. This category ensures that the radiation levels are safe and will not cause any health hazard. The radiation levels in upper range of this category signify the background radiation level of our modern living environment, which is inevitable in current society. In the case of RF, EMR, the quantity to be measured, is power density in the units of microwatts per meter squared. Power densities in microwatts per meter squared less than 0.1 indicate no concern. Between 0.1 and 10 indicate slight concern. 10 to 1,000 indicate severe concern, and values greater than 1,000 indicate extreme concern. Okay. According to the standard, the values mentioned above refer to peak measurements and are applicable to single RF sources such as GSM, UMTS, WiMAX, Tetra, radio, television, DECT cordless phone technology, and WLAN except radar signals. The standard treats pulse or periodic signals such as mobile phone technology, DECT, WLAN, and digital broadcasting as more critical sources and recommends that they should be assessed more seriously, especially in the high concern ranges. Non-pulsed and non-periodic signals such as FM, short, medium, long wave, and analog broadcasting can be addressed more generously, especially in the lower concern ranges. The exposure limits prescribed by the medical associations of many of the countries are based on the building biology standard. For example, the guidelines prescribed by the Austrian Medical Association, which is abbreviated AMA or AMA, suggest the same limits mentioned above as within normal limits: slightly above normal, far above normal, and very far above normal. Okay, so just to reiterate, no concern is less than 1 microwatt per meter squared, slight concern between 1 and 10 microwatts per meter squared, severe concern 10 to 1000 microwatts per meter squared, and extreme concern over 1000 microwatts per meter squared. Okay, next up. Next up, we have Bioinitiative Standards. The Bioinitiative report is the work of renowned health professionals and many scientists on the potential hazards of exposure to EMR arising from the use of wireless technologies. The first edition of the Bioinitiative report was released in 2007 and then updated in 2012. This report includes an extensive documentation of adverse biological health effects and on both general and sensitive populations because of exposure to EMR. Their focus is primarily on chronic exposure to low frequency, extremely low frequency, and radio frequency EMR fields. Bioinitiative claims to be an independent body comprising of medically acclaimed professionals who believe that deployment of wireless technology always happens before the health risks are assessed. Which is true. That's what we see. This report urges the necessity to reconsider the current situation regarding excessive use of wireless communication technology. The following is a summary of the latest Bioinitiative standards. The standard that justifies the cumulative outdoor RF EMR limit to be reduced from 1000 microwatts per meter squared to just a few microwatts per meter squared. So we're talking about cumulative outdoor limit to be reduced from 1000 to just a few. Based on several studies related to health effects caused by mobile phone and base station radiation, the benchmark for lowest observed effector level was found to be 30 microwatts per meter squared. Considering the higher electric sensitivity of children and a safeguard for chronic and long-term exposures, the above-mentioned value of 30 microwatts per meter squared is reduced by 10 times to set the precautionary action level for chronic exposure to pulsed RF radiation between 3 and 6 microwatts per meter squared. The Bioinitiative report also states that this level is not definite, i.e. based on information from newer studies it may decrease or increase this level. So, what a good bunch of guys, Bioinitiative. Let's get the highlights of that. Their limit was 1000. Their outdoor limit was 1000 microwatts, per meter squared. They've reduced it to 30, and as a precautionary measure for children, they've reduced it by 10 times again to between 3 and 6. Okay. And now let's just see what's going on here. We've got building biology, okay, bioinitiative, and the Austrian Medical Association, all, batting around in the ballpark of under 1,000 microwatts, let's say, and going as low as 30 and as low as 3. And let's look here. No concern is under 1 microwatt per meter squared. Even 1 to 10 is slight concern. Okay? Now let's look at life through IEEE's lenses. IEEE says, okay, can you see that? Yes. 10 million microwatts per meter squared. Can you see a little bit of a difference here? So when you get documents coming back at you saying we abide by the IEEE reference values for public exposure, this is outrageous that they would do that. When you think about the parameters of the building biology, the Austrian Medical Association and the Bioinitiative, let's just read those again. Look, they take in various factors such as electric fields, magnetic fields, waves, radiation, indoor toxins, pollutants, fungi, bacteria and allergens. Do IEEE do any of that? No. They go, thermal or non-thermal? Stamp 10 million. And that's who you're trusting. We've also heard that there aren't any medical people at all in IEEE. Or is it the FCC? Yeah, it's definitely FCC, there's no medical people. But there's something very dodgy going on there. So, down to the results. With the advent of technology, there are more wireless devices today than ever before, such as LTE phones, 3G phones, GSM and CDMA phones, wireless speakers, smartwatches, wireless earphones, portable Wi-Fi routers, couldn't think of anything worse than that, wireless mice and keyboards, voice-controlled smart speakers like Alexa, health monitoring devices, etc. In places such as universities, offices and homes, multiple devices are communicating using different technologies at a given time. Oh, the joy! Note that a majority of devices communicating either using Wi-Fi, Bluetooth or cellular technology. Therefore, we have investigated the power flux densities, which is abbreviated PFD, and I'll be using that from now on, of the EMR emitted from specific devices, which are used very extensively in our day-to-day life. Okay, so the methodology. For our measurements, we have used the HF32D RF analyzer by gigahertz solution, which is very easy to use RF radiation meter. This detector covers frequencies from 800 MHz to 2.7 GHz, and therefore can be used to measure 4G, LTE, UMTS, 3G, GSM, GPS, radar, WLAN, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth radiation densities. Pretty handy piece of kit. The device works on the principle of Geiger counter effect by deploying 3 log period antennas in 3 orthogonal directions. In order to avoid disturbances from low frequency EMR sources, the HF32 RF analyzer suppresses sub 800 MHz frequencies. The range and signal values of these devices are turned to assess EMR in accordance with the building biology standards discussed in section 3b. If the power density exceeds the designated range, an attenuator DG20 is used, which increases the range by a factor of 100. To execute the process of measurement taking, the EMR source device or devices were placed along the length of a measuring tape. The RF analyzer was held from its rear end to avoid any reflections of EMR from the hand of the device holder. To accurately evaluate the radiation of the test device, the following procedure was followed. So I'm just going to rattle through this procedure. It's quite a lot of words to explain a very simple test, so I'm just going to rattle through it. Step 1. The area around the test device was probed with RF analyzer approximately 50 centimeters from the test device to obtain the direction with the highest level of radiation. Step 2. Next, the direction of the RF analyzer was fixed at the point where highest radiation level was recorded, and then the analyzer was rotated along its longitudinal axis to maximize the reading of the instrument. This ensured that the antenna of the RF analyzer was aligned with the plane of polarization of the EMR source. Step 3. Now the relative orientation of the RF analyzer and the test device was fixed, and then the two devices were moved such that the RF analyzer was placed on measuring tape with its direction of antenna parallel to the measuring tape and its base lying flat on the plane of measuring tape. Step 4. For the remaining part, the test device was fixed at the beginning of the measuring tape in the orientation as obtained after step 3. If there were two devices being used in a particular scenario, the same steps were performed to fix the second device at the other end of the measuring tape. Step 5. Lastly, the relative distance between the RF analyzer and the test device was varied by shifting the RF analyzer in fixed steps along the measuring tape to record the power flux density values. Let's call this relative orientation as X, and the corresponding values of power flux density obtained as P. Then by changing the orientation of the antenna to its orthogonal directions, Y and Z, we obtain two more sets of values, Py and Pz, respectively at the same positions where Px was recorded. Finally, the total magnitude of the power density at each position was calculated using equation 1, where Px, Py and Pz represent power density levels received by the antennas orientated in the X, Y and Z orientation respectively. And we have a equation here. Can't quite see it. It was like P equals P2x plus P2y plus P2z. Yes. An attenuator DG20 was used with the RF analyzer. Whenever the measured power density was beyond 2000 microwatts per meter squared, the attenuator increases the range of the analyzer by a factor of 100. For our investigations, we devised a few scenarios based on frequently encountered situations in the day-to-day life of a normal user. The testing was done in an open field, free from any sources of electromagnetic radiation, as shown in Figure 4. So let's go to Figure 4, and we'll see the kind of thing they were doing. So you have the HF32D radio frequency analyzer here, measuring tape and the test device, all with this field with negligible ambient EMR, which I assume, yes, there's no houses, there's no people at all, which is good. Okay, so going to B, Table 3 shows schematics of the experimental setups used for analysing cellular devices. Two cases were considered: phone calls on 2G, 3G, 4G networks and data streaming on 3G, 4G networks. So here's table 3, the experimental setup for cellular devices. 2G, 3G, you can't see my mouse, can you? That's okay. 2G, 3G, 4G phone call. So cell tower, get to the phone, to the iPhones. But also 3G, 4G data streaming. So you've got the smartphone, access and needs there. Also analysed. Okay. So number 1, the 2G, 3G, 4G phone call. So that's using the cell tower. The power flux density, that's it, read it as well. The power flux density getting emitted from the mobile device, which is put on call, is recorded according to the above procedure. All of the communication channels from the device, such as Bluetooth, infrared, Wi-Fi and GPS, were turned off. The results are plotted in figure 5a. In figure 5a, we can see that the smartphone, I'll get the figure up for you while I read it. In figure 5a, we can see that the same smartphone emits most radiation on the 3G network, second highest on 2G network, and least on the 4G network at almost all distances. That's very interesting to know. While performing a phone call at a very close range, the power flux density measured is, I'll just abbreviate these, 43,000 on 3G, 38,000 on 2G, and 18,000 on 4G, and that's microwatts per meter squared. So definitely 3G is the worst one. The close range radiation in all 3 cases is above 1,000 microwatts per meter squared, which is classified as extreme concern according to the building biology standards, and very far above normal according to the AMA standards, which was the Austrian one. The radiation is around 10,000 times higher than the precautionary action level recommended by the Bioinitiative guidelines. Right. So 2G, 3G, 4G phone call. Just got to summarise that, because you really got to take this in. It's a lot of words, but just take these nuggets away with you. The close range radiation in all 3 cases of 2G, 3G and 4G using a phone call is above 1,000 microwatts per meter squared, which is extreme concern. Very far above normal, and 10,000 times higher than the precautionary action recommended by a Bioinitiative. Okay? But these values are certainly within the IEEE reference values for general public exposure, which are between 9.5 million microwatts per meter squared for 2G networks and 10 million microwatts per meter squared for 3G and 4G networks. This implies that phone calls performed on 2G, 3G and 4G devices are safe in terms of thermal effects, i.e. a user will not face any health issues arising from tissue heating, but he or she is certainly at risk of developing health issues from non-thermal chronic exposure and biological effects. Near the test location, it was found that the nearest 2G, 3G and 4G base stations were all located on the same cell tower. Therefore, the observation of PFD, power flux density levels, 3G, 4G, 2G network cannot be attributed to further away 3G, 4G base stations. To be able to explain the exact reason for higher EMR emission of the smartphone on 3G networks compared to 4G and 2G requires thorough analysis of 2G, 3G and 4G antennas used on the smartphone, including their 3-dimensional radiation patterns and antenna configurations, which are beyond the scope of this work, meaning that's not what we're here to talk about. At about 50 centimeters away from the phone, the radiation level drops below 1000 microwatts per meter squared, which comes in the next category of severe concern and far above normal. Therefore, the use of wired hands-free earphones and headphones is recommended. Wired, yeah, not wireless, which generally have a standard length of 1.2 meters. And by keeping the phone at about 1 meter from the user, a good level of safety can be achieved. So there's some guidelines straight away for you. Okay? Right next to your body is extreme concern. Even 50 centimeters away. Yeah? That's still, that's severe concern, yeah? Next to your body, extreme concern. 50 centimeters away, severe concern. And 1 meter away, a good level of safety can be achieved. Yeah. How often do you use your phone as a meter away from you? Hardly. Well, it's pretty much impractical for that. But if you're going to be streaming videos from your phone, turn the sound up, get the data low, and put it far away. You know, put it on the windowsill or something, so you can listen and watch from a distance. It's much safer to do that. It's actually much safer not to stream at all than download it offline and then watch it like that. That's the safest way, with a wired connection. Okay, number 2, 3G, 4G data streaming. The mobile device used for this setup was Samsung Galaxy M30. To ensure continuous data transmission from the cell tower to the smartphone, a long HD video was streamed on the phone. Here we go, talking about streaming now. The measured power flux density values are plotted in figure 5b. So I think I'll read this and you have that. No. But there's the graph. Let's have a look at 5b. So we can see 3G is pretty much all the time much worse than 4G. Even so, we're not trying to see which is worse, which is trying to see the radiation levels of using the phone for this purpose, really. Okay, so from this graph, it is evident that the power flux density of a 4G network is lesser than 3G networks at all distances during data transfers. At very close distances, the radiation reaches around 38,000 microwatts per meter squared and 29,000 microwatts per meter squared for 3G and 4G networks respectively. So that's 38,000 for 3G and 29,000 for 4G. Which is a situation of extreme concern or very far above normal. You know, the top band, right? According to building biology standards. At a distance of approximately 50 centimeters again, the radiation in both cases dropped down to about 1,000 microwatts per meter squared, which is categorized as a situation of severe concern or far above normal. It's the same as before. Smartphones are extensively used to stream videos, and therefore I used to do it all the time. Stream all the time, always watching videos. Smartphones are, therefore it is recommended to keep the phone at least 50 centimeters away on a table to ensure that the user exposed to a power flux density less than 1,000 microwatts per meter squared. Therefore, 4G networks must be preferred to 3G networks for data consumption. Which is a bit annoying because I did hear in a talk by a scientist that that you should turn your 4G capability off on your phone and restrict it to 3G. But what this paper's telling me is that if I do that, I'm going to increase the radiation intensity by doing that. So if you're going to be streaming, make sure in a good signal area, you're not in a weak signal area, and that 4G is activated. and then the radiation will be as low as possible, and then abide by the distancing rules. You know, a metre away. I'd say 50 centimetres away is just not good enough. The scenario of 3G, 4G data streaming is similar to the situation of 2G, 3G, 4G phone call, since all the measured power flux densities are well within the range of IEEE reference values for general public exposure, but pose serious health risks when seen in accordance with the building biology, AMA and bioinitiative standards. So who do you trust here? You've got IEEE, which has vested interests in getting a mobile phone into your hands, you know, and it depends on business, it's business, and who've stamped this 10 million microwatts, which just covers pretty much, you know, all the streaming, all the phone calls. Of course it would, it has to. And then you've got three bodies, building biology, AMA and bioinitiative standards, just saying, no, 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 no. Who are you going to trust? So if anyone says IEEE, say, excuse me, I know better. Because now you do, because you're listening to this paper. Section 3. Better have a sip of tea. "5G and beyond. The testing of all the devices in this work has been carried out in India, where 5G networks are projected to be deployed by the year 2021, which isn't far away. Therefore, measuring PFD levels for devices communicating on 5G networks could not be included in this work. 5G is set to use frequencies between 30 GHz and 100 GHz and would have a bandwidth of 60 GHz, which is much higher than all previous generations. Owing to the increased frequency, the wavelengths in 5G communications will be in the order of a few millimeters. Shorter wavelengths travel shorter distances. Therefore, 5G networks will be much denser compared to existing networks. This necessitates that more base stations be placed at much closer distances in order to achieve good coverage. In 3G cellular networks, the density of base stations is about 4 to 5 base stations per kilometre squared. And the area served of each base station is large, and therefore called a macro cell. In the case of 4G LTE networks, the base station density is about 8 to 10 base stations per kilometre squared. The coverage of each base station is lesser and referred to as a microcell. However, in the case of 5G networks, the base station density is expected to be increased to about 40 to 50 base stations per kilometre due to the high propagation loss of millimetre wave technology. The area served by each base station in 5G networks is very small and is commonly called a small cell. But let's not forget that 5G is more of 1G to 4G. Yeah, it's not just these small cells which they're saying is going to come later down the road. It is 1G to 4G and much more of it. And let's get our terminology, you know, so that we know what we're talking about when we talk about this with other people. 3G networks, around 4 to 5 of those are in a kilometre on average, and they're called macro cells. 3G, 4 to 5 in a kilometre, macro cell. 4G, 8 to 10 in a kilometre, microcell. 5G, 40 to 50 of the small cells, in a kilometre. But 5G is more of the macro cells and micro cells. Okay, just to make that clear. The area served by each base station in 5G networks is very small and is commonly called a small cell. The shorter millimetre waves would also not be able to penetrate building walls effectively. Therefore, the 5G architecture will separate indoor and outdoor networks, which means that there will be separate access nodes for indoor users. Oh, what a joy! I'd love 5G indoors, wouldn't you? 5G base stations will also be installed on streetlight poles, meaning that people will be extremely close to the base station antennas. Now, I have a streetlight outside my bedroom window, and I'm pretty sure most of you do. Do you really want 5G gigahertz technology on your streetlight? Really? Are you hearing this? .5G will also employ relay nodes that amplify the wireless signals from the base stations before they reach the device. Oh yes, we want some of that. The high data rate requirement of 5G, which is around 1,000 times more than 4G, is expected to be solved by the use of massive MIMO, which is massive in, massive out, which incorporates a large number of antennas. MIMOs are those kind of poles with it's like a cricket bat, you know, and the top is thick and then it's got a pole coming down. Those are your MIMOs. If you see those around, they're trying to make them look very inconspicuous these days by painting them brown and for them to kind of camouflage into the area, but I can tell them from a mile off now. I know them. You should have a look for them around your town, and if they're going up, they're installing 5G, which is these massive panel of different cells inside. The 5G network contains microcells, macrocells, relays, streetlight access points, and separate indoor nodes, which operate simultaneously all the time. So everything we've just talked about is going to be interconnected and operating all the time, 24/7. Due to the extremely high density of base stations, streetlight access points, separate indoor base stations, relays, and massive MIMO technology employed in 5G, a person will be exposed to very high levels of power flux densities, whether he is indoors or outdoors, or whether or not he is using any wireless devices in close proximity. In other words, it may be suspected that even the ambient PFD which a person is exposed to in most situations throughout the day may fall under the category of severe concern, according to the building biology standard, far above normal according to the AMA standards, and may be higher than the precautionary action level recommended by the Bioinitiative guidelines. If 5G networks are deployed without careful analysis of expected exposure levels, almost all people in the area of coverage may be exposed to dangerous levels of power flux densities, the outcomes of which in the near future may turn out to be calamitous. So the guys that wrote this paper, they're saying that if all this furniture is set up, it's like you've got a phone on streaming 50 centimeters away from your body all the time, 24/7, because that's what severe concern was. So even if you're not using a phone, even if you're a technophobe with no gadgets whatsoever, you're going to be affected by this. It's criminal. Currently, South Korea, United Kingdom, Germany and the United States are at the forefront of 5G network deployment, with several companies already providing 5G services in these countries. It is strongly suggested that a study similar to the one in this paper be conducted in these countries by correlating the findings with the standards mentioned in Section 3 in order to get a consistent view of radiation exposure in 5G networks as compared to previous generations. This will provide much needed insight and caution to all countries that are yet to adopt 5G. Okay. Okay, on to the next section. Table 4 shows schematics of the experimental setups used for analysing Wi-Fi use cases. 3 cases were considered: laptops or smartphones connected to Wi-Fi routers, Wi-Fi mobile ad hoc networks, and portable Wi-Fi hotspots routers. 1. Laptop and smartphone connected to Wi-Fi router. The laptop used for this setup was the Lenovo Z5170, which was put on airplane mode with only Wi-Fi turned on. The laptop was connected to the Wi-Fi router operating at 2.4 GHz. The devices were kept facing each other, as shown in Table 4. Let's go to Table 4. Okay. So your router facing your laptop, RF analyzer in between them. Right. The power flux density readings are plotted in Figure 6a, which is this one here. Power flux densities. Comparing the scenario of a laptop and smartphone connected to a Wi-Fi router, it can be inferred from Figure 6a that the effect of the router on the power flux density dominates until a distance of about 1.7 meters from the router. Let's have a look at here. So about 1.7. That's here. Just next to the router, the PDF is about 60,000 microwatts per meter squared. Sorry, it just makes me laugh when I see these ridiculous figures. 60,000. Still within the IGNOT, you know? I mean, how much would you have? How many Wi-Fi? Just blah! What power would you need coming from this to go anywhere near the IGNOT? It's so ridiculous. And drops below 100 at 1.7 meters away from it. So it is advisable to always stay 1.7 meters away from any Wi-Fi router. And I know in the past, when I was younger, I had a Wi-Fi router at my desk. Pretty bad. And in my last house, I used to sit by the TV, in front of the TV, and the Wi-Fi router was behind me, and it was less than 1.7 meters away from me. So that was really bad. I now see what I've done wrong in my life when I read these papers. You know? So it's advisable to stay 1.7 meters away from any Wi-Fi router, whether you are using a laptop or a smartphone. Up to a distance of about 100 centimeters, the effect of the smartphone or laptop on the power flux density dominates. The power flux density, measured at close proximity of the smartphone, is 5,123 microwatts per meter squared and 12,886 microwatts per meter squared in the case of a laptop, which is more than 2 times greater than the latter. Okay, so that's what I was talking about earlier, that laptops was more concern. If you're using a laptop on the Wi-Fi and you're under 1.7 meters, you're in big trouble, basically. The reason for this is attributed to PCIe antennas, don't know what PCI is, used in the laptop, which are designed for better connectivity in terms of range and data speeds. This is more powerful, right? Therefore, smartphones should always be preferred in use cases where a laptop is not absolutely necessary. The PFD in both cases drops below 1000 microwatts per meter squared at a distance of approximately 50 centimeters. Although this PFD still falls in the category of severe concern or far above normal, according to the AMA standards, and is not to be considered safe, it is still better than the category of extreme concern or very far above normal. Thus, it is better to keep laptops on a table and operate them at from an arm's distance, or keep the smartphone on a table while watching lengthy videos. Keeping a laptop on the lap or keeping a smartphone connected to the router in the pocket for long durations would result in dangerous amounts of radiation directly entering the body. So you've got great advice here. You know, where do you hear this advice coming from the industries? Keep laptops on a table, operate from an arm's distance, cable them up. If they have to be on Wi-Fi, make sure you yourself are over 1.7 meters from the router. If you're using, it's preferable to use your phone rather than a laptop. Laptops are more powerful, have more powerful antennas. And don't keep it in your pocket. Switched on, connected to the Wi-Fi. Just don't do it. Put it on airplane mode when you're not using it. Number 2, mobile ad hoc network. 2 smartphones, Samsung Galaxy M30 and Redmi Note 5, were connected using Wi-Fi direct technology to form a mobile ad hoc network, and a large file was transferred between them. The power flux density ranges, so readings along their line of sight are plotted in Figure 6b. A hotspot is created between 2 devices and is meant to handle several connections at a time, which explains why the PFD on the side of a sender, 11,819 microwatts per meter squared, is 5 times higher than that of the receiver, which is 2,223 microwatts per meter squared, at a very close range as shown in Figure 6b. Go to Figure 6b and you'll see this. Okay, this is sender, receiver. Okay. At a distance of about 1 meter from both the devices, the PFD drops below 10 microwatts per meter squared, which is a situation of slight concern or slightly above normal. So even a meter away, you're in at the concern range. 3, portable Wi-Fi router. Oh, happy days. Nowadays, portable Wi-Fi router hotspots, which work on the 4G network, are very popular due to their portability. ease of use with almost no setup time. In our measurement, we used the portable Wi-Fi hotspot to measure the power flux density emitted from the device up to 3 meters in the direction of maximum radiation. The readings are plotted in figure 6C. Although these devices are very easy to use and portable, they emit a high amount of radiation, 92,237 microwatts per meter squared at very close distances. This is because portable Wi-Fi routers are connected to the 4G network and simultaneously function as Wi-Fi routers capable of handling multiple connections at a time. This is the highest reading we have recorded among the devices considered in the paper and falls in the category of extreme concern or very far above normal. The PFD drops below 1000 microwatts per meter squared at about 75 centimeters and below 10 microwatts per meter squared at 200 centimeters. By keeping the device about 200 centimeters or 2 meters away from the user, one can attain a situation of slight concern or slightly above normal. One would love to attain that, wouldn't they? Here's that graph, by the way. Oh, that's what that is. That's the geofile, right? Which is the portable Wi-Fi router. Okay. From all the cases mentioned above, the lowest radiation observed while accessing the internet is in the case of a smartphone connected to a Wi-Fi router, followed by a laptop connected to the Wi-Fi router. It should also be noted that accessing the internet via Wi-Fi routers involves less radiation in general than accessing the internet via cellular networks. In terms of health risks, it can be concluded that Wi-Fi technologies also pose serious health risks in terms of chronic exposure, non-thermal and biological effects of EMR, but will not lead to any tissue heating or health risks arising from tissue heating. Section D, EMR due to Bluetooth devices. So, for those who use Bluetooth, listen up. Table 5, Bluetooth speakers with audio stream. Table 5 shows the schematic of the experimental setup used for analysing a Bluetooth speaker. The Bluetooth speaker was connected to a smartphone via Bluetooth wireless technology, kept 3 meters away from the speaker. The power flux density between the two devices was measured, and the results are plotted in Figure 7. In Figure 7, it can be seen that the highest reading. This is Figure 7. Let's have a look at that. Okay. Figure 7, it can be seen that the highest reading just next to the Bluetooth speaker is 487 microwatts per meter squared and just 152 microwatts per meter squared near the smartphone. The PFD drops below 10 microwatts per meter squared, or about 50 centimeters from the smartphone and 25 centimeters from the speaker, which is a scenario of slight concern or slightly above normal. Therefore, it is recommended to keep the smartphone at least 50 centimeters away and the speaker at least 25 centimeters away from the user while playing the music. Smartphone 50 centimeters, speaker 25 centimeters. Just remember these stats. Bluetooth earphone. Wireless earphones are very quickly replacing wired earphones due to the ease of use. The subject was chosen to wear Bluetooth earphones connected wirelessly to a smartphone, Samsung Galaxy M30, kept in his trousers right pocket. A long audio file was played to ensure continuous communication between the devices. We measured power flux density in different areas around the body as shown in figure 8. Here's figure 8. Wow. So if you listen to your phone Bluetooth with Bluetooth wireless headphones, it's going to radiate your whole body, your head, all the way through your torso, in your groin area, and even in your feet. There's some, for goodness sake. I'm sure they're going to talk about those figures later. But for now, number 3, smartwatch connected with phone. Many people these days are using smartwatches to track their health and routine. Therefore, it becomes very important to study whether the radiation coming from the usage of smartwatch is adversely affecting the user's health or not. The subject was made to wear a smartwatch on his right hand, which was connected to smartphone Samsung Galaxy M30 via Bluetooth, and the smartphone was kept in the subject's right trouser pocket. Let's not forget that some phones are worse than others, and they'll greatly affect the results. So if you've got a brand spanking new phone from Huawei or something, it's going to be way worse than this. The power flux density was measured in different areas around the body, as shown in figure 9. Let's have a look at figure 9. So this is smartwatch. You've got 986 there. Sorry. There we go. Got 986 on your wrist. 1053 going in your groin region. 128 in your stomach. Intestines, really. 5 stomach region. 10. No, so nothing in your feet. It's not getting there, not getting there. Not affecting this side, the left side of the body much. The right side of the body, if you've got the phone in the right side and the watch on the right side. Interesting, when you go to figure 8, you've got more radiation on the left side of the head, on the left speaker. So obviously it has to communicate with more power from your mobile device. That's what I would assume. Anyway, back to the smartwatch. Based on the values of the power flux density shown in figure 8, it can be observed that the use of Bluetooth headphones heavily impacts the head region, with power flux densities in the range of 4,000 to 8,000 microwatts per meter squared, which comes under the category of extreme concern or very far above normal. Ooh, that's not nice. Remember, it's extreme. Extreme. In the region of the pocket where a smartphone is kept, the power flux density is 850 microwatts per meter squared, which is a situation of severe concern or far above normal. In the region of the pocket, yes. And the other one was in the region of the head, yeah. So you've got, if you use Bluetooth wireless headphones connected to a phone that's in your pocket, you're going to have extreme radiation in your head. Plain and simple. In the remaining regions, the power flux density is not as significant. Thus, it can be said using Bluetooth earphones puts a person at risk of developing health issues related to non-thermal chronic exposure and biological effects in the head, shoulder and pocket regions, but is safe from any thermal effects of EMR exposure. Oh wow, that's all fine then, isn't it? Guys, just throw the thermal thing out the window, right? It's not applicable. They're just saying this and that in this paper to be polite, or to be scientifically correct. Thermal has got nothing to do with it. You can develop health issues from chronic exposure of non-thermal levels, okay? In the case of a Bluetooth smartwatch, the radiation in the pocket region as well as near the smartwatch is about 1000 microwatts per meter squared. See figure 9, which is the one you can see next to it, which can be considered a case of extreme concern and very far above normal. Yeah. Therefore, it is expected that a person may develop health issues arising from non-thermal chronic exposure and biological effects only in the pocket and wrist regions. The observed radiation levels indicate that the user is not at any risk of health arising from thermal effects. So, okay, so they've said the same thing. So, you have extreme radiation in your head with Bluetooth earphones, and you have extreme radiation in your wrist and your groin area when you use either of those with a smartphone in your pocket that's connected to them. In most practical situations, there are several wireless devices functioning simultaneously in the vicinity of a person, which makes it there's a little spelling mistake, which makes it become important to understand the collective radiation exposure due to all these devices. Here, we consider the case where a person is being exposed to EMR from Wi-Fi, cellular and Bluetooth devices, namely a laptop, smartphone, Wi-Fi router, smartwatch, Bluetooth earphones and a Bluetooth speaker. That's quite a concoction. We've considered these devices to ensure the best balance between worst-case exposure and the most probable set of devices that a person may use. Okay, so they're doing a probable scenario and a worst-case scenario. So here are the images for you. The ones with the green bubbles that's the probable scenario, a typical one, you could say. You've got a smartphone, a Bluetooth smartwatch, a laptop, Bluetooth earphone, Wi-Fi router, and a Bluetooth speaker. I mean, not everyone has the Wi-Fi router next to them, but it's a good one to put in the test, just to really hammer it home how bad these things are. And you've got the next one, which is a worst case scenario. You do the radiation points, yeah, okay. No, it's a radiation point of that setup, sorry. Worst case exposure, yeah, okay. So I do correct myself. In all practical situations, ambient EMR is always present. Therefore, our readings were taken in a practical test location where there was an ambient EMR of 5 microwatts per meter squared. Yeah, so this is the worst case scenario, isn't it, really? You've got a Wi-Fi router next to you, possible, I've done it before. Bluetooth speaker, I've done that. Smartwatch, so I know people who do that with wireless Bluetooth. They might be on the phone at work and inputting data onto a wireless laptop. You've got a wireless mouse, you've got a wireless keyboard. I mean, there's so much that could go on at work, So all you office workers out there, just think about this. For our measurements, we consider a test subject using his laptop on a desk, wearing a Bluetooth smartwatch on his left hand, a neckband type Bluetooth earphones around his neck, and also holding a smartphone to his right ear. The laptop is connected to a Wi-Fi router kept 50 centimeters away on the same table. The Bluetooth earphones are connected to the smartphone and playing music. The smartphone is put on call over the 4G network. A Bluetooth speaker is also kept on the same desk, which is connected to the laptop. Figure 10 shows the test subject and the placement of various devices near him, and Figure 11, I should have just read that really, the measured power extensities at several points near the test subject. At each test point, the orientation of the RF analyzer was adjusted to ensure the maximum reading. As can be seen in Figure 11, the measured PFD exceeded 10. I'll get that from the for you while I read this. The measured power flux density exceeded 10,000 microwatts per meter squared in all points except the leg region, where a power flux density of 500 microwatts per meter squared was recorded. This implies that the EMR in the leg region comes under the category of severe concern, or far above normal. So when you look at that image, you think, oh, 500 is not bad in the leg region. Well, that's still extreme concern, or very far above normal. A power flux density of 133,400 microwatts per meter squared near the Wi-Fi router was the highest reading recorded in our test scenario, indicating that out of all of the devices, the Wi-Fi router was the most contributing factor to the cumulative exposure. Therefore, it is highly recommended to avoid keeping a Wi-Fi router on the table. Due to the proximity of the mobile phone, the region near the right ear is exposed to a power flux density of 36,700 microwatts per meter squared. A power flux density of 33,600 recorded near the left arm can be attributed to the Wi-Fi router. Ah, right. Smartwatch and laptop together. Whew. Nice one. The PFD recorded near the chest, torso and groin region, 123,000, 5,700 and 8,700 are all in the category of extreme concern or very far above normal. The exposure in the groin region in a cumulative exposure scenario is several times higher than the case considered in section 4D2 and 4D3, where a smartphone is kept in the pocket will be connected via Bluetooth. Okay, so the exposure in the groin region is several times higher than the case considered when you were just doing Bluetooth with a phone, Bluetooth headphones with a phone, or a smart watch Bluetooth with a phone. A power flux density of 13,200 microwatts per meter squared was recorded near the keyboard of a laptop. This high reading is attributed to the laptop's Wi-Fi antennas, which are located on top of the screen. Thus, a wired connection to the router should always be preferred to Wi-Fi. Based on the above discussion, it can be concluded that keeping many wireless devices in close proximity is extremely dangerous in terms of non-thermal, chronic exposure and biological health effects, but will not lead to any thermal effects, since all measurements are within the IEEE reference values for general public exposure. I love how they keep referencing the IEEE at the end, just to show you how ridiculous it is. Okay? Right. Now we're on to the health risks and hazards of EMR exposure. From released reports and published articles, it is evident that there is a strong correlation between distance from cell towers and a variety of EMR health-related complaints. People who live in the vicinity of cell towers or base stations reported health issues such as insomnia, fatigue, headaches, and nausea. Some of these people were even diagnosed with serious health diseases such as leukemia, Alzheimer's, autism, ASD, neuropsychiatric issues, brain tumours and breast cancer. Bioinitiative Report has compiled more than 1,800 scientific research articles which report serious impact on human and animal bodies, like abnormal gene transcriptions, genotoxicity, DNA damage, chromatin condensation, no idea what that is, loss of DNA repair capacity, reduction in free radical scavengers, neurotoxicity, decreased sperm morphology, and impaired development of brain and cranial bone. In this section, we have summarized the adverse health effects of EMR exposure. And that reminds me, at the bottom of this video, I will put the links to these bodies that we were talking about earlier, which is the building biology, the bioinitiative, and the AMA, the Austrian standards, and also the IEEE, just so you have all those links, and then you can access all their research. And really inform yourself. Okay, so this isn't a very nice section to read, but unfortunately it's the reality. So these are the adverse health effects of electromagnetic radiation exposure in the non-thermal. Okay. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, abbreviated IARC, an independently financed organisation, classified radiofrequency RF EMR under Group 2B carcinogen, which means that there is a possibility that RF may be carcinogenic to humans. However, Hardell and Kalberg claim that there is clear evidence of cancer from long-term level exposure to pulsating and non-ionizing EMR. Their findings warrant IARC to put, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, to put RF EMR in Group 1, known carcinogen. Another study by the National Toxicology Programme, which is abbreviated NTP, conducted studies to evaluate potential health hazards and the risk of cancer from RF radiation. Mice and rats were used as test subjects and were tested on exposure to RF radiation in the 2G and 3G spectrums, 700 to 2700 MHz. This study reported clear evidence of tumour in the hearts, brains and adrenal glands of male rats. Not good. Although not many biophysical mechanisms have been proposed regarding how RF radiation leads to tumour-causing effects, the thermal exposure limits are set solely based on one observed phenomenon, which is the amount of power absorbed per mass of tissue, or in other words, how much the tissue is getting heated. The thermal limits are specified such that any RF radiation above these limits starts to heat the body and shows observable effects like disturbance of blood flow and metabolism. Nonetheless, few studies have reported that even at radiation levels below the accepted limit and legally defined for human exposure, there are signs of tumour-promoting effects. Next section, B, pregnancy and infertility. A strong correlation between male infertility and EMR from mobile phones has been asserted by several researchers. A case study was conducted on male Wistar albino rats who were exposed for 14 days, 15 minutes each day to high EMR. The radiation had impacted their testicular architecture and enzyme activity. It was shown that EMR from mobile phones induce an oxidative stress in testicular tissues and ultimately results in decrease of semen quality and lower sperm motility. The severity of oxidative stress depends on usage patterns of the mobile phone owner. In a 2017 study to evaluate the effect of 4G LTE EMR on sperm formation in male rats, it was concluded that longer durations of exposure results in decreased spermatogenesis. Incidents have been reported where telecom workers who were incidentally exposed to high EMR doses developed skin burns and injury to heat-sensitive tissues such as the lens of the eyes, the testicles and the brain, leading respectively to cataract, male infertility and seizures. The carcinogenic nature of EMR, which results in mutation of sperm cells, as well as testicular cancer, has also been reported. Thus, the probability that future generations will inherit unhealthy or low immunity genes is also increased. In a case study which involved exposing pregnant rats to EMR during different stages of pregnancy, uterine congestions, dead reabsorbed fetuses, hemorrhage, unequal and asymmetrical distribution of fetus implantation sites, malformation, hematoma, short trails, and growth restrictions were observed. According to 24 study, children whose mothers used cell phones during pregnancy had 25% more emotional problems, 35% more hyperactivity, 49% more conduct problems. How do you diagnose a conduct problem? And then 34% more peer problems. C. Auditory system damage. When a mobile device is actively connected with the cellular network, all the components of the auditory system, including the skin, external, middle and inner ear, cochlear nerve and the temporal lobe surface absorb radio frequency energy. Moreover, it is known that the outer hair cells in the cochlea are highly sensitive to a wide variety of exogenous and endogenous agents, which include externally applied electric and magnetic fields. EMR is damaging to unprotected or externally exposed biological tissue, such as the outer hair cells in the cochlea. People who have an overactive cortical stress network in the brain are more vulnerable to tinnitus. A common disease or effect is tinnitus, which is in most cases a neurological disorder. A person suffering from tinnitus perceives high-frequency ringing among other sounds which are externally non-existent. Such people generally report poor quality of sleep and several difficulties throughout their daily life. In the worst cases, even suicides have been reported in light of EMR. It is relevant to note that the number of tinnitus cases reported since the last few decades has increased several folds. Studies have shown the evidence that the main cause for such an increase can be attributed to the widespread and long-term usage of cellular phones, particularly in those cases where one ear is much dominantly used over the other. Another phenomenon to be aware of is radio frequency hearing, which was confirmed to exist as early as 1960s. Although RF energy is electromagnetic in nature, some of it is converted into acoustic energy, both within and outside the cochlea, and is perceived as a sound centered at about 5 kHz. The exact frequency may vary depending on the dimensions of the subject's head. Dabolka, A.L., reviewed several long-term case studies and concluded that long-term intensive use of mobile phones does lead to hearing losses. Prolonged use, under 1 year, of mobile and cellular technology may decrease the ability of a person to hear high-frequency sounds. The person is more likely to develop acoustic neuroma, in which non-cancerous tissue develops on a nerve, which links the inner ear with the brain. In advanced stages of acoustic neuroma, pressure is exerted on the brain, which may result in dangerous neurological effects, including vertigo, confusion, unsteadiness, facial numbness, and headaches. But casual or infrequent usage does not lead to any immediately recognizable adverse effects or any significant damage to the auditory system. So this is what people mean when they say the effect is cumulative, as in if you're using it constantly, you're going to get all this stuff. Yeah. I used to hear very high-pitched noises a lot in my old house, but since I've reduced my exposure to EMR, it's gone down significantly. I used to get it at night and I couldn't sleep, and I would just hear this high-pitched ringings like like this, just all the time. You can block it out if you focus on something else. But when you're lying there awake at night and that's all you can hear, it's not very nice. So, effects on childhood development. Statistics show that in recent years, more children have begun using cell phones or smartphones compared to their elder generation. In addition, it is observed that the average age at which children nowadays begin using smartphones is also significantly less than before. Therefore, it is expected that this population will absorb significantly more EMR radiation throughout their lifetime. The existing public safety limits for EMR exposure are not acceptably protective of public health, especially the young population, including babies, neonate, fetus, and embryo. I'll just read that because it's a good sentence. The existing public safety limits for EMR exposure are not acceptably protective of public health. That's a good statement. The time a fetus spends in the mother's womb is a critical time of development because the health problems that are laid down in the cells or in epigenetic changes in the genome have lifelong consequences on the health of that individual. The young population are more vulnerable to EMR exposure because of their smaller body mass and rapid physical development, both of which magnify the impact of EMR on the body. The differences in bone density and the amount of fluid in a child's brain compared to an adult's brain allow children to absorb greater quantities of RF energy deeper into their brains than adults. It is known in the field of medicine that the brain tissue in children shows more electrical conductivity when compared with adults. This allows for more EMR penetration in proportion to the dimensions of the head. Effects on the nervous system, which is still in developmental stages, are also causes of concern. While anatomical development of the nervous system in children is finished, EMR could still hamper the functional development, which generally progresses into adulthood. Blood-related disorders. Exposure to even very low-intensity EMR can affect the blood-brain barrier by increasing its permeability. Blood-brain barrier prevents the flow of toxins into sensitive brain tissues, and when its permeability increases due to exposure from EMR, it no longer provides the protective barrier. Salford et al. Conducted a study and found that just single 2-hour exposure to EMR from cell phone results in an increased leakage of blood-brain barrier, and 50 days of such exposure can lead to neuronal damage. Wow. The EMR level at 0.001 watts per kilogram can affect the blood-brain barrier, and this limit is about 1,000 times lower than the FCC 1.6 watts per kilogram, and IGNIRP's 2 watts per kilogram limits allowed. Yeah, okay. Research is required to investigate the damage done by EMR exposure on other barriers like the blood-placenta barrier that protects the developing fetus, the blood-testes barrier that protects developing sperm, and the blood-ocular barrier that protects the eyes. and the blood-gut barrier that protects proper digestion and nutrition. So you have a blood barrier protecting everything. DNA molecules in our body directly interact with AMR. This is DNA damage. The double helical structure of DNA causes it to act like a fractal antenna. Excuse me. The characteristic of a fractal antenna is that it interacts with a wide range of frequencies. Therefore, the structure of DNA makes it vulnerable to damage from EMR exposure over the entire range of non-ionizing frequencies, from extremely low frequency, 300 MHz to 3 kHz, to radio frequency range, 3 kHz to 300 GHz. This interaction of DNA and EMR generates free radicals, produces stress proteins, and causes gene mutations. Human DNA and stem cells are permanently damaged by EMR exposure, as they do not have the ability to adapt to chronic exposures of EMR, and thus DNA repair is not possible. So this is a scientific document, guys. So if you're wondering whether, if you're on the fence, not sure, because you don't get this stuff on the media. You're never going to get it. You've got to go to the source of the information, and then all lies are out the window. It's plain and simple here. This will wreck your DNA completely. If you have chronic exposure, of course. So you have to work on limiting your exposure. Last one on the health stuff. The effects on mental health and cognitive health. Many neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and motor neuron disease are found to be caused and triggered by EMR exposure. EMR damages the neurons of the brain, reduces the neuronal reactivity, prolongs their refractory period, and increases the neural membrane conductivity. All such diseases mentioned above involve death of specific neurons and therefore are called neurodegenerative diseases. As mentioned in the introduction of this section, people living in vicinity of cell towers and base stations are prone to develop many neuropsychiatric problems like tremors, numbness, headache, nausea, memory loss, dizziness, altered reflexes, depression, and many other severe brain and cognition-related health problems, such as paralysis, stroke, and psychosis. Isn't that a lovely concoction? So, the next section is protective measures and ambient EMR minimization. So we've had, the deleterious effects of EMR and what it can do, and now we have some protective measures. And I'm going to take a little break now and read all of that to you in part 2. Hope you enjoyed the first part. This is the kind of video where it's reference, you explore the links yourself that I put at the bottom, you put this on in the car as you drive, and you pause and you go back to it and you really take in the words, so that you're armed and equipped with knowledge. So I welcome you to part 2 next time. Bye for now.